A 15-year-old girl vanishes without a trace. Everyone assumes she simply ran away, due to adolescence, her parents' divorce, the usual reasons adults attribute to children when they can't understand their loneliness. But then, a misspelled word, a single misplaced letter, makes her father realize his daughter didn't leave on her own. And from that point, secrets with friendly faces begin to emerge. One Saturday evening in December, snow was falling lightly outside the windows of the small town of Hermiston, Oregon. Everything seemed peaceful, or at least the semblance of peace that adults often construct for children after a divorce. Jaden Parkinson sat across from her mother at the dinner table. 15 years old, she had a bright face and deep brown eyes, a gaze not typically found in someone her age. Her eyes were fixed on the cold plate of food, her hand gently stirring the food with her fork without actually eating. "How was school today?" her mother asked, trying to keep her voice light. Jaden simply shrugged. The question was repeated every evening, but the answer was always silence. Her mother sighed in frustration, not pressing further, glancing at the clock. The call with Mark, Jaden's father, would come at 8 o'clock, as every Sunday, like a belated form of atonement. And right on cue, the phone rang. Jaden didn't take her eyes off the plate. Her mother picked up the receiver, answered, and after a few brief exchanges, handed the phone to her daughter. "Take it. He misses you a lot." Jaden took the receiver, holding it close to her ear. "Hi, honey." Mark's voice was warm, a little hoarse with fatigue. "How was your week?" "Fine," Jaden replied curtly. "Are you still practicing piano?" "Yeah." Silence stretched out. The sound of the television from the living room mixed with the ticking of the clock on the wall. The conversation ended in a few minutes, as usual. That evening passed like any other. Heavy, empty. A few weeks later, the family organized a small party for Aunt Clara's birthday, Jaden's mother's sister. Relatives arrived one by one, bringing cakes, gifts, and smiles, which Jaden found artificial, but still treated with politeness. In the noisy crowd, a man entered, Ben Blakely, a distant relative on her mother's side, almost 20 years older than Jaden. He had sandy hair, a worn leather jacket, and a smile that wasn't radiant, but pleasant enough. "Hi, Jaden," he said first, sitting down next to her on the back porch. "Hi, Uncle Ben," she replied, giving a slight nod. "Long time no see. Do you still write poetry these days?" The question made Jaden look up, a little surprised. Few people remembered that she used to enjoy writing poetry. But Ben, somehow, still remembered. They talked for a few more minutes about books, cats, and the fact that Ben used to work in a garage near her school. Ben told about a 3-colored cat that got stuck under a car and how he saved it. Jaden laughed, the first smile of the day. From the window, her mother saw that moment, glancing at Mark standing beside her, smiling faintly. "It seems like she's slowly getting better," her mother said. Mark nodded slowly. Ben stood up, and before leaving, he pulled a small notebook with a soft leather cover from his pocket. "I'm giving you this. Whenever you're too sad, just write it all down in here, and if you want, burn it. That way, the sadness will disappear." Jaden took it, thanked him, and said nothing more. That night she sat on her bed, opening the first page of the notebook. Under the bedside lamp, the inscription on the inside cover was handwritten in slanted letters. "Sadness only takes shape when we don't speak it." She frowned slightly, then wrote the first line. From that day on, Ben started visiting more often, always with a very reasonable excuse. Fixing a sink, replacing a light in the hallway, reinstalling the living room bookshelf. Jaden's mother, who wasn't used to doing repairs, was genuinely grateful. "He's like an angel," she told the neighbors, then turning to her daughter. "Your mother and I are so lucky to have Ben helping us. Your father probably doesn't even remember your birthday." Jaden didn't answer, but she didn't deny it. Ben always appeared gently, always asking, "Do you need anything? Have you had any strange dreams lately?" And sometimes, only when they were alone, He whispered things that made her think. They love you, but they love themselves more. It's an instinct of adults. They're not bad, just helpless when facing the loneliness of their children. Jaden used to laugh when she heard that, because it sounded more like philosophy than comfort. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized it was true. Once, after an outdoor lunch, Ben drove her to a small ice cream shop about 15 minutes from home. He bought 2 vanilla ice cream cones, then suggested sitting on the stone bench behind the shop, where there were fewer people. "Have you ever thought about leaving?" Ben asked, his eyes looking far away towards the railroad tracks. "Going where? Any place where you don't have to pretend to smile so others think you're okay?" That question seemed to cut through the rope that Jaden was trying to tie tightly around her emotions. She bit lightly into the ice cream, avoiding his gaze. Ben didn't push. He put his hand on the back of the bench, away from her, but close enough to create an invisible protective barrier. That patience, that unhurried presence, made Jaden start telling things she had never told anyone. About the time she was teased by friends because she didn't have a father to pick her up. About the night her mother sat crying in the bedroom, thinking her daughter was asleep. About the fact that she didn't know who to feel sorry for, her mother, her father, or herself. Ben listened, nodding slightly without interrupting. "All those feelings are real, and you have the right to feel that way," he said. That statement, simple as it sounded, was something Jaden had never heard directly. That night, she wrote a few lines in the notebook Ben gave her. "Uncle Ben is the only one who understands me. Maybe that's the scariest thing." She tore out the page, hiding it under her pillow. But the next morning, in a hurry, she left it on her desk. Ben came to replace the light bulb in the room. When her mother walked in, the piece of paper lay bare on the table. She picked it up, read it, and smiled silently. "Did you write that for Uncle Ben?" Jaden blushed, shaking her head. Her mother folded the paper, saying nothing more. But from that day on, she gave Ben the house key without hesitation. "In case something happens," she said. The atmosphere in the house changed from then on. No one asked, but Jaden naturally talked to Ben more. She started asking his opinion about essays, new songs she heard, even choosing new sneakers. Ben never criticized, nor did he ever praise too much. He only responded just enough to make her feel respected. But beneath that kindness, small signs began to appear, like faint scratches on a glass that seemed transparent. Once, when she was about to tell her mother about it, about Ben putting his hand on her hair longer than necessary, about his gaze when he looked at her in the mirror, her mother was on the phone, then said, "Talk later. I'm stressed about the new contract." Jaden nodded, then never told that story again. One day, Ben left a small note on her desk. "No one listens to you like I do." She read it, kept silent, and, for the first time, hid it, not because she was afraid her mother would see it, but because a part of her didn't want to throw it away. The Monday morning in the principal's office at Hermiston High School began with a quiet parent-teacher conference. The English teacher, a young woman with worried eyes, was flipping through Jaden Parkinson's report card. Her grades had dropped sharply in the past 6 weeks, but what worried the teacher more was her absence. Jaden hasn't turned in her final essay, missed 3 group study sessions, and doesn't participate in class at all. She's not herself anymore. Jaden's mother, wearing a simple business suit, sat up straight, crossing her legs rhythmically. She gave a brief smile. "She's just in her teens. Maybe she's withdrawing a bit, but she's still okay. Uncle Ben is helping her." "Ben?" The teacher hesitated. "A distant cousin. Very kind. Also studied psychology for a while. She trusts him." The teacher said nothing more. At the same time, at home, Jaden was sitting at her desk, the light from the window shining obliquely on the thick notebook. She wrote, non-stop. The lines were slanted, somewhat frantic. "I don't know why I'm sad, but I know for sure I don't need anyone to ask anymore. They ask only to check off another responsibility, not because they really want to hear. Beside her, Ben sipped cold coffee in a ceramic cup. He sat still, letting her write. When Jaden stopped, he said softly, "That's why I still think handwriting is better than texting. It forces us to be more honest." Jaden nodded. She felt like she was doing something important, even though no one checked or praised her. Each line, each thought revealed on the page, seemed to separate her from the outside world. Ben picked up an old letter, one of the ones Jaden wrote but never sent. In it, she wrote to her mother, "I'm tired of seeing you cry and then laugh. Tired of guessing whether you'll care or ignore me today. I'm tired of having to be a good daughter when all I hear in my head is screaming." He put the letter down, nodding slightly. "You write very honestly. But you know what? Don't send it. They don't deserve to hear it. They'll just call it exaggerating." Jaden was silent. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever called her feelings right. That evening, when her mother came home, Jaden had locked her bedroom door. She burned an old photo, a picture of all three of them on their last picnic. Mark's face blurred first, then her mother's, and finally her own, still smiling in the flames. Ben said, "If you can't keep good memories, then don't keep any memories at all." One afternoon, after going to the library with Ben, Jaden said she felt terribly lonely, like everyone was acting in a play and she was an audience member forced to stay when the lights went out. Ben gently touched her shoulder. "That's because the world out there is locking you up with falsehoods. They label everything, good, bad, normal, deviant, just so they feel in control. But I don't need you to label yourself. I just need you to be real." That night, Ben brought a small gift, carefully wrapped in silver paper. Jaden opened it. Inside was an old cell phone, without a signal, without a connection. "This is for texting me whenever you need to. Only me, no one else. No need to ask anyone. No need to explain anything." She took it, hesitating. "No one knows this number, only you and me. It's like our own secret code." Jaden nodded. At school, friends started whispering when she walked down the hallway. She no longer sat at the same table with Mia, her best friend since 4th grade. She avoided eye contact with acquaintances, smiled awkwardly when called by name, and began to choose to sit alone in the library, where no one asked questions. The English teacher noticed it, but every time she called her aside, Jaden only said, "I'm tired." Nothing more. She didn't rebel, didn't react. She was just drifting away from everyone, like a piece of paper floating down the stream that no one could reach. At home, every time her mother asked if she was okay, Jaden just smiled slightly and said, "Yes." Enough to reassure her mother, but not enough for her to see something eroding behind that smile. One evening, Jaden sat at her desk, flipping through the old pages of the notebook. There was a line she didn't remember ever writing. "I have a feeling that if I disappeared, there would only be one person who remembers, and that person is not my parents." She looked down at the silver phone. It wasn't ringing, but Jaden picked it up, pressed the screen. A single message. "I'm still here. No one can touch you when you keep your secrets." Jaden read it over and over, then closed the notebook, stood up, and locked her bedroom door. She pulled the curtains. Outside, the streetlights were faded. Everything was silent. But in her head, a voice rang out, gentler and clearer than any other sound. "Only I am real." Ben called it a escape from the world, and Jaden, after weeks of living in that hovering silence, didn't ask again. She just nodded, not asking where, not asking how long. She found herself learning to read the spaces in other people's sentences, something her parents never left for her. Ben's Ford pickup truck left town near dusk. The July sky was still bright enough to clearly see the trees on both sides of the road lightly shedding their dusty brown coating. As they passed the dirt road that led deep into the forest north, Jaden began to feel a different silence, not like the silence in the classroom or at the dinner table, but a raw silence, heavy as wet earth after rain. The log cabin appeared after the third curve, a simple wooden structure, its sloping roof covered with moss. There was no light, no sign of life. But Ben was smiling, as if showing off a secret he had kept for many years. "This is a place for special people like you," he said, opening the door with an old key. "No one's here. No one will fault you. No one will ask you to be happy." Jaden stepped inside, her sneakers making a light sound on the old wooden floor. The house smelled of mustiness, mixed with a hard-to-describe odor. There was a simple table, 2 chairs, an old mattress spread on the floor, and a dilapidated wooden bookshelf, on top of which were a few notebooks with unclear titles. Ben lit a candle, the flame dancing on the walls. "No TV, no phone. Here, you'll hear your own voice." Jaden sat down, pulling her knees close to her chest. This space made her shiver, but strangely, it had something in common with her own mind at this moment, empty, without light. That night, she stayed, for the first time overnight outside without telling her mother. When a text came from her, Jaden put the phone aside, not opening it, just leaving it still. And that silence, she knew, would be interpreted in the gentlest way adults could bear. Her mother thought she was with Mia. Mark wasn't informed either. The next morning, the early light filtering through the window made Jaden open her eyes. She found herself still lying on the mattress. The blanket had fallen to the floor. Ben was not in the room. She stood up, walked to the door. The door wasn't opening. She tried turning the doorknob. Useless. A moment later, Ben appeared from behind the house, carrying a bundle of firewood and a smile as light as the morning dew. "I locked it because there was the sound of wolves last night." Jaden nodded slightly, but something stirred inside her like small stones thrown into a lake. She didn't remember ever agreeing to being locked up, but then reassured herself. Maybe it was because she was tired. Maybe she had fallen asleep. Ben made tea with a mini gas stove, giving her a cup. On the rim of the cup, there was a small crack that had been glued with clear glue. "You know," he said, "I used to live here alone for 6 months, writing in a diary every day. This house kept me from getting lost." Jaden looked around. The scratches on the wooden floor, muddy footprints near the doorframe. Then her eyes stopped at an iron hook driven deep into the window frame. There was a chain attached to it, rolled up neatly and hung high. "That's to keep animal cages," Ben said quickly when he saw her eyes touch it. "I used to raise a fox, very wild, but then it went away." She didn't ask more. Something made her not want to ask. Before dark, Ben spread the blanket again, giving her a new notebook. "Write down what you feel, not for anyone to read, just so you know where you're going." Jaden wrote a few lines without beginning or end. She felt her hand heavier than usual. When she asked, "What if I need to go out?" Ben just smiled. "You can go anywhere as long as you like." That sentence echoed in her head all night. At home, her mother left 3 missed calls. The message only had one. "Are you okay?" Not seeing an answer, she guessed her daughter was staying at a friend's house, then continued to work the night shift. Mark was in another town, trying to finish a project drawing. He didn't know that while he was signing technical documents, his daughter was sleeping in a house that was not locked from the outside and couldn't be opened from the inside. That door, at this moment, was still silent. No one thought of it. No one thought of her. No one knew. That door didn't need a key to lock, just a gentle word at the right time, and a lonely heart craving to be trusted. The news of Jaden's disappearance didn't come with screams or police sirens outside the porch. It came like a quiet wind, cold, dry, shapeless, while her mother was cooking dinner. "She said she was staying with Mia," she replied when the homeroom teacher called to report that Jaden had missed school 5 days in a row. Mark got a call from his wife. He didn't ask the questions people usually asked. Not, "What did she say last?" Not, "Anything strange about her lately?" He only asked, "Where's Ben?" There was no answer from Jaden's mother. Her mother called the police at 2:17 p.m. Her voice broken, her hand shaking so much that she dropped the phone twice. In the statement she wrote, She never stayed out overnight without telling me. She's not like that. The duty officer, middle-aged, named David, just nodded, taking careful notes. In his head, this was still a typical case of a teenager in family conflict, until he read the voluntary departure letter found under Jaden's pillow. "I'm going my way. Please don't worry. I just need quiet. I love you all, but I love freedom more." The handwriting was Jaden's, but something was wrong. Mark noticed it first. She misspelled the school name. He pointed to the last line, where Jaden wrote Hermastone High instead of Hermiston High. She never makes that mistake. "Maybe it was a slip of the tongue," the police officer said. She's a good student in literature, extremely attentive to spelling." Mark looked him straight in the eye. For the first time in his life, he found himself impatient with the simple-mindedness of others. He left the police station as dusk fell. On the way back, Mark didn't turn on the headlights as early as usual. The harsh yellow light made him uncomfortable. He stopped the car in front of the old house, looking through the window. The lights in the living room were still on, but Jaden wasn't there. He didn't go in. He just stood next to the car for a long time, his hands in his pockets, his breath forming smoke. Something inside him quietly cracked, not out of fear, but out of the feeling that he was watching something familiar turn into a memory right before his eyes. 5 minutes after Mark left, an old beige pickup truck stopped neatly in front of the entrance. Ben got out. He was wearing a plaid shirt, carrying a paper bag from the supermarket. The smell of hot food emanated: stew, freshly baked bread, and something with cinnamon. Just enough to evoke a feeling of family. "I thought you might need something easy to eat, easy to swallow," Ben said, his eyes gentle, placing the bag on the dining table as if he had never left the house. Jaden's mother tried to force a smile, her voice trembling. "Thank you. I've always considered her like a niece," Ben said, putting his hand gently on her shoulder. "If you need anything, I'm ready to help find her." Jaden's mother nodded, moved. She didn't see anything strange, just grateful that a kind man was still standing by the family when everyone else was only sending condolences or not answering the phone. Ben asked tactfully, "Did the police say anything more? Any clues about her friends?" "No," her mother shook her head. "But they'll find her." Ben smiled lightly. "Definitely." At the same time, not far away, in the log cabin in the forest, Jaden sat in the dark. No candles, no open windows, only the sound of insects and the clinking of the lock on the back door. She remembered the phone Ben gave her, but it had been taken away. When was the last time she heard herself laugh? When was the last time she called herself by her own name? No one knew where she was. But someone did know. Someone was still speaking for her, in a gentle, proper voice, sad enough that no one suspected. And that person only Mark could be. The one who no longer believed in gentle voices, continued to go, step by step, towards that darkness. The news spread like wildfire. On the local news at 6 o'clock in the evening, Jaden's image, brown hair, big eyes, high cheekbones, appeared with the words, "Missing. If you have information, please call the hotline." Immediately after the news was a scene of a middle-aged man, calm in demeanor, with a sad face standing in front of the camera, Ben Blakely. "I just want to say to Jaden, if you're listening, you can come home at any time. No one is angry with you. We all love you." Ben was wearing a white shirt, the top button unbuttoned, his voice hoarse as if choking. The camera zoomed in slightly on his eyes, where tears had just welled up, but didn't roll down. "You're special. Everyone knows that. But you don't need to go alone to prove it." The segment was short, only 30 seconds, but enough to make the whole town sob. Except Mark. The hunch had no clear reason, but for Mark it was stronger than anything he had ever believed in. Not deduction, not evidence, just a feeling deep in his chest, the hunch of a father that his daughter needed him. And he was the only one who knew it. In that moment, he was no longer the father who was late, who missed birthday appointments. He was the only man in this world who knew for sure that someone was wearing a mask, and his daughter was the one who had to pay the price. He turned on the headlights, turned around, and plunged into the dark night with no clear destination. Only one goal: to find out the truth, at all costs. Early the next morning, Mark sat in his car in the parking lot near the city library, his eyes glued to his laptop. The browser tabs were stacked on top of each other. Old personnel records from the construction company, real estate data, satellite images of the forest west of town. The coffee was cold beside him, not a sip taken. He wasn't hungry, nor was he sleepy. Only one thought: where did he hide her? Then he rested for a moment. He opened his phone to his conversations with his daughter. He read them over and over 3 times. "I'm okay. Don't worry, Dad. My friend invited me to go away for a few days. I need a break. Love you." But it was the break written together without the accent, something Jaden never used. She always corrected her dad's spelling when writing letters. The tone was too smooth, cold. It was like someone was pretending to be his daughter. Back to the investigation, Ben's records were nothing special. No prior convictions, no strange traces. But when he dug up old photos, family gatherings, Thanksgivings, he saw something. In all the times Ben appeared, something was always off. Once Jaden turned away when he approached, once she disappeared from the photo when Ben stood behind. No one noticed. But now he couldn't help but see it. Mark zoomed in on the photos, comparing dates. In a picture taken on Thanksgiving last year, Jaden was wearing a red dress, clearly chosen by her mother, but her hands were clenched behind her as if hiding something. Ben was smiling, the typical kind relative smile, but his eyes were looking down, not at the camera. Then Mark remembered something old, very old. Ben used to work for a construction company building power lines in the mountain area west of town. He called his old friend who worked in the planning department. "Do you still keep records of construction near Echo Mountain?" "Yes, but it's very old." "Why?" "I want to know where Ben Blakely used to be." That evening, in the log cabin, Jaden sat huddled listening to the wind whistling through the gaps in the planks. Ben put his hand on her shoulder, leaning down to whisper, "Here, you can be yourself. Out there, they just want to make you disappear. They can't stand that you're different. They'll try to change you, then abandon you." Jaden turned her face away, but didn't leave her place. Part of her still doubted. Another part believed in what he said, not because of logic, but because it resembled the pains she had never named. "Do you feel like you're being free?" he continued. She didn't answer. "You can scream, cry, curse. Here, no one judges. But once you go back, all that will be called not normal." Silence. Ben left the room, locking the door as usual. A lock of love, as he called it. Inside, Jaden sat leaning against the wall, her eyes no longer reflecting anything but the fatigue of someone who had stopped believing in the light. Meanwhile, Mark came to the local police office, bringing with him the old printouts he had found after many sleepless nights of data tracing. The paper was crumpled from an 80s decade land map, the bottom corner stained with dry coffee. "Here," he pointed to a small dot printed off-center. "House number 3. It hasn't been demolished." A young officer frowned. "That area. Landslides. Very difficult to enter. Removed from the civil map since 1984. I'm not sure it's still intact." "That's why," Mark said. "No one has paid attention to it for 20 years. That's why he chose that place." The police nodded. "We'll check." Mark didn't wait, but not out of impatience, but because he couldn't stand the feeling that Jaden might be somewhere, right now, quietly desperate. He got in the car, started it, and headed straight north. The sky began to get windy. Through the rearview mirror, the darkness crept along the wheels as if swallowing up the miles. Arriving at the foot of Echo Mountain, it was evening. The dirt road leading to the old construction area was overgrown with grass. The warning signs were crooked. He parked half a mile away, then walked, carrying a flashlight, map, and the small pocket knife Jaden had given him on Father's Day. The forest had no trails. The phone's GPS lost signal. The paper map no longer matched reality. The soil and rocks had eroded. The landmarks were worn away by wind and time. Mark had to follow his feelings, stepping step by step like a mine detector. And Jaden, she was living in another space, where time had no meaning and light was a distant memory. Ben didn't hit her, not in the traditional way. He said he was educating. Every day Jaden was forced to record, "I'm sorry I was born. I'm a mistake." After recording, Ben played the recording all night. Her voice, her own voice coming from the darkness, became a living nightmare. The prison had no windows, only a cold, moldy wooden wall and a bell hanging overhead. Every time Jaden was tired, wanting to sit down, the bell rang loudly. Ben would come in, snarling, "If your legs are weak, your heart is weak too." He cut her hair in sections, not to hurt her, but to wash away the lies of society, as he told Jaden. The long hair, Jaden's small pride, fell fluttering like broken-winged birds. Worse than that were the lies. He told her that her mother had turned her back, that the police were issuing an arrest warrant because she was sleeping with an old man. Jaden just went silent. There was no faith to hold on to. But there was also no faith to break, because she didn't believe, but also didn't dare to hope. That night, Mark spread the map out on the desk. His hands circled each area, lakes, log cabins, forest lines. Each circle was a pounding beat in his chest. Each time the pen left the paper, fear swept over him. He didn't sleep. His eyes were dry, but his mind was remarkably clear. He remembered the old security guard's words. He once mentioned the quietest place he had ever known, deep in the mountains, near Tilner Creek. The stream was not marked on tourist maps, but was on the old ranger maps. He found it, winding around an unexploited strip of forest where the sun only shone for half a day. At dawn, Mark set off, carrying a flashlight, map, compass, water, and a small lighter, as if something inside him had determined that this was no longer a search, but a liberation. Deep in the forest, the wind became thick, the air full of the smell of rotten earth and damp moss. Mark suddenly stopped. A tire track was still imprinted on the soft ground, not too old. Someone had been here. Recently. He turned right, following the tracks, following a path that had almost been swallowed by the forest. And then he saw it, a wooden pole standing lonely in the hollow ground, marking the old construction area. No signs, no warning tape. But the wood still had faint red paint, a single trace that had not been erased by time. Mark took a few more steps when his foot twisted. A tree root hidden under the leaves made him lose his balance, falling face down on the damp ground. The flashlight fell from his hand, rolled away, and went out. He tried to stand up when he felt a sharp pain in his ankle, a sprain, or worse. The pain was excruciating, but he gritted his teeth and didn't cry out. He couldn't call anyone. The phone had no signal. He crawled a little towards the flashlight, grabbing onto dry branches, panting. Just then, a small whistle sounded from afar. 3 short bursts, 1 long burst. The sound of local police according to the radio code for checking deep forest areas. Mark seized the opportunity, turned on the flashlight, and shone it into the sky. A few minutes later, another light reflected through the canopy. Police flashlights. They found him, his clothes full of mud, his hands scratched, one leg unable to stand. "What are you doing here?" the officer asked. Mark didn't answer immediately. He just raised his head, his eyes tearing up, his hand shaking as he pulled out the crumpled map in his jacket pocket. "House number 3, he whispered, less than half a mile away. Without asking much more, they helped him up, and following his instructions, found the path leading to the dilapidated log cabin. The door was locked from the inside. but a light flickered through the cracks in the wood. And from that side, a weak knocking, then a gasp, like someone had just heard life for the first time after months of being silent. Two Cadillac SUVs flashed yellow lights steadily through the thick fog covering the Oregon forest. No sirens, no commotion. This was not a raid, but a groping between the terrain of suspicion and fear. Mark said nothing. His hand still held the crumpled map. The wind whipped through the car glass, but the coldest thing was in his heart. The feeling of about to touch a truth that he wasn't sure he could bear. At the same time, in the second-floor room of the log cabin, Jaden sat curled up by the window nailed shut from the outside. Her hands were now tied with rope, tied to the wooden bar by the window, forced to stand all night. Last night, Ben turned on and off the recording of her crying. 6 hours, non-stop. "This is a lesson about truth," he whispered at midnight, when she was so exhausted that she couldn't cry. "The world won't forgive. Only I can keep you." The trite, confused words that he tried to inject into Jaden's head throughout the past few days. Before leaving, he leaned close to her ear, saying, "If you scream, the bears will come first. And you know, they have no humanity. They don't love you like I do." He left the door ajar, but no one but him knew it was the only way out of the second floor. The main door was bolted shut, an old, heavy wooden bar, closed as tightly as her remaining will. All morning, Jaden thought nothing, just counted heartbeats. At number 127, she felt freezing cold. At number 212, her knees began to shake, but she still counted, as if she stopped, her body would stop too. From afar, Mark pointed, "That place." The log cabin appeared dimly in the mist. Police split in 3 directions. One tried the main door, locked from the inside. Another discovered traces of an escape route on the side, a trap door leading to the second floor, camouflaged under a layer of grass and rotten wood. They entered the house. The wooden floor groaned. The smell of dampness, old smoke, and something musty like burnt hair. Mark didn't wait for orders. He suppressed the pain, quickly running up the stairs. A wooden door was bolted shut. He banged hard, shouting, "Jaden!" "It's Dad." Silence. Then something like a breath burst out after many days of being suppressed. Not a call, but the sound of remaining life. He banged again. "Jaden!" A small crash, then silence, then a dragging sound, very faint. Outside, the police arrived, using a crowbar to pry open the door. The door burst open. In the dim light, Jaden stood there, clothes torn, barefoot, eyes red but tearless. Her hands were scratched, one side still attached to the broken rope. She didn't step right away. She looked at Mark, as if not believing that image was real. Then in the fleeting moment where time seemed to stop. "Dad," she sobbed, "why did you find this place?" Mark knelt down, hugging his daughter. She was shaking. Her body was so light that it could break at any moment. Mark didn't answer. He couldn't. He just held her tightly to his chest, burying his face in her hair that was patchily cut. In one corner of the wall, there was still the word "Dad" she drew with tears and soot, blurred in the frost. Ben was arrested while driving back to the log cabin. A bag containing food and a spare battery to charge the educational speaker was still on the passenger seat. As soon as the pickup truck turned into the forest road, 3 police cars blocked the road, the lights flashing like cutting into the middle of the trees. He braked suddenly, a second of hesitation. Then he opened the door, not stepping out, but rushing back into the forest on the side, running, his feet trampling on dry branches, not looking back. The young officer shouted, "Stop!" "Freeze!" Ben didn't stop. He ran headlong, panting, his eyes wide. Although without weapons, he still moved like someone driven to the brink, full of distorted survival instincts. He only stopped when 3 officers pressed him against a rotten tree stump, his hands shaking with cold and despair. They pointed guns. "Get down!" Ben struggled, shouting, "You don't understand anything! She needs me. You only know how to destroy. Ruin her like this world once did." He roared, his throat hoarse. "I saved her. I purified her. You are the kidnappers, not me." A swift move, a kneeling down to press down. Handcuffs clicked tightly on his wrists. Ben continued to hiss through his teeth even though his voice was hoarse. "She knows it. She will come back to me. One day." Not a single officer replied. They didn't need to. They knew they had seen the true face of a person who had once worn a friendly mask, and now was a fanatical madman, dragged from the place he thought was his kingdom. After all, Jaden was taken to the hospital. Doctors said she was malnourished, severely sleep-deprived, and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. But she was alive. And Mark, who had always been late in the most important moments, had arrived in time this time. And that was the only thing that gave this story an ending, even if it was a scarred ending. The morning sun streamed through the window of the psychological counseling center, where Jaden was sitting huddled in a green velvet chair. The light didn't warm her, nor did it dispel the slight tremor in her fingers. The psychologist, a middle-aged woman with bright eyes but a voice as soft as silk, was writing something in her notebook. Not all therapy sessions had words. Some were just silence. Some were just presence. "I still don't remember the first days there clearly," Jaden said softly, her eyes not leaving the crack on the tiled floor. "But there's one thing I'll always remember. The sound of me crying being played over and over. 6 hours. He made me listen to myself like listening to a sentence." On the other side of the city, Mark was waiting in the hallway of District Court Number 5, where Ben, the one who called himself the Protector, would appear before the dock. The courtroom wasn't crowded, no press, no lenses. The case had been kept secret because the victim was a minor and due to the sensitive nature. But for Mark, this place was the final battle. He didn't sit. He stood, his hands clenched as if ready to hold on to every fragment of justice if it collapsed. Investigating police described the scene of the log cabin as a torture chamber designed with a moral facade. No chains, no whips. Instead, there were writings hanging on the wall. "How the world betrays you. Silence is a virtue. Parental love is fake." Each article was taped with black tape, right next to the small speaker that replayed the "sorry for being born" apology. Jaden, when asked, didn't cry. She described everything with a strange emptiness, as if all the tears had been drained by long nights without light. "He cut my hair in sections, cutting and saying, 'Each strand is a lie you once believed.'" When the defense attorney was invited to speak, he didn't ask for leniency, just said that his client, Ben, refused to speak. But then, as if he couldn't remain silent forever, Ben stood up, his voice deep and not trembling at all. "I didn't kidnap anyone," he said, his eyes still not looking at Jaden. "I just kept a young soul from being tainted by a rotten world." He turned to the jury. "You think the girl was imprisoned? I freed her. From the lies. That family always loves, that teachers are always right, that this world is a safe place. I gave her the truth." The whole courtroom was silent, holding its breath. Ben continued, his eyes now gradually brightening. Not out of remorse, but like someone preaching his own doctrine. "She wrote letters to me. She chose to stay. She learned to endure, learned to stand in the darkness and listen to herself. I didn't torture anyone. I purified. I didn't force. I guided." We live in a society that raises children with lies, then calls people like me monsters when they speak the truth. A female prosecutor interrupted. "You are accused of confining a minor for 200 days, using brainwashing, mental and physical abuse. What do you have to say to the victim?" Ben turned to Jaden for the first time, but he didn't look into her eyes, but through them, as if she was no longer a human being, but just a concept he once possessed. "I'm not sorry," he said. "I would do the same again if I had the chance, because she needs me. This world is not worthy for her to return. As Ben finished speaking, the sound of a chair being slammed back echoed in the heavy space. Jaden's mother, Sarah, stood up, her hands clenched white, her eyes not leaving the face of the one who had walked into her house with a bag of food and a kind smile. "How dare you say, she needs you?" Her voice was hoarse, but each word cut through the air like a razor blade. The 15-year-old girl locked up, haircut, humiliated, forced to stand every night in a dark room. That's what you call liberation? The police stepped forward, intending to advise her to calm down, but the judge raised his hand, letting her continue. "I let you into my house," she said, tears now not weakness, but fire. "I trusted you. I praised you in front of my daughter, thinking I had found someone who could help her get through the days after the divorce. I called you family." She pointed at Ben, who still didn't react, his eyes fixed on some invisible point. "You are not a person. You are a nightmare that walks, talks kindly, bakes cakes, tells jokes at the right time." Her voice choked. Then she lowered her hand, looking at her daughter sitting quietly, gripping the chair, not crying, not shaking, just looking at her mother with eyes as if she had just touched someone's heart again. "And my biggest sin," she said softly, "was not seeing. Was being too busy not to notice the change in her eyes. Was letting a monster nest in the trust of the whole family." At that time, Ben tilted his head slightly, not to bow down in remorse, but as if he was observing a rage. A strange look, as if he still believed he was right, and the whole world wrong. The judge didn't need to signal anymore. The atmosphere in the courtroom spoke for itself. Enough. At the end of the trial, the judge, a silver-haired man who had been a prosecutor in the largest kidnapping case in the state in 2009, said in a cold voice, "This is not just an illegal imprisonment. This is the devastation of a child's personality. It is depriving childhood, distorting perception, sowing self-loathing, a form of violence that leaves no physical wounds but leaves huge permanent cracks in the child's soul." Defendant Ben Blakely, you are not only accused of kidnapping, but also of a systematic series of acts aimed at manipulating, controlling, and eliminating the personality of a minor, someone you once called family. Throughout the trial, you have not once shown remorse. Instead, you justified yourself with carefully chosen words, not to ask for forgiveness, but to paint a distorted world where you claimed yourself as the savior. With all the charges concluded to be guilty, the court declares life imprisonment, no parole for 30 years. The trial ended. Mark didn't shed tears, but he clearly felt a cold current running through his spine, both anger and gratitude. Anger because justice came too late, gratitude because it finally came. That night, Jaden sat next to her mother in the backyard. She still startled when the wind rustled the trees. But this time, instead of cringing, she whispered, "Mom, if anyone asks later, can you say, I tried not to let him take everything from me?" Her mother took her daughter's hand, saying nothing. But that hand gripped tightly, as if promising that for the rest of her life, she would not be alone again. Autumn in Oregon always comes in a gentle way. The leaves seem to be tinged with gold, but don't break. The wind is lighter, like someone who has cried enough. School reopened after the summer break, but Jaden wasn't in a hurry to return to class. Instead, every Tuesday and Friday morning, she was driven by her mother to the Psychological Rehabilitation Center, where children who had their time stolen learned again how to trust the rhythm of life. Mark didn't go with her mother and daughter, but always appeared before the end of the therapy session. No questions, no interference, no urging. Just parked under the old oak tree, sitting quietly in the car cabin, listening to the old music Jaden used to play on the rare occasions they drove long distances together. No one mentioned what had passed. Words like imprisonment, manipulation, or brainwashing didn't appear in conversations between the two fathers. Instead, they talked about the new pastries at the old shop, about the birds nesting under the eaves, about a book that Mark bought but hadn't had time to read. And sometimes, often in the late afternoons, they didn't say anything at all. Just sat next to each other, so that silence was no longer something to avoid. Jayden no longer avoided the sun. She let her hair grow long again, uneven, with a slight curl in places. But she didn't comb it, didn't straighten it. Each strand of hair was now proof. She survived. Her eyes didn't avoid strangers, although she still didn't have enough courage to look long. And when someone accidentally raised their voice, she startled, but didn't run away. Mark, for his part, renovated his daughter's bedroom. The pictures on the walls were replaced with white paper, blank, as if to make room for the future. But there was one thing he didn't touch: the scribbled words Jayden wrote at the age of 8 with a red felt-tip pen close to the edge of her desk. "I am a good listener." He didn't paint over it, didn't paste pictures, just dusted it every week. That afternoon, a clear afternoon with the smell of wood and apple pie from the shop across the street, Jayden came out of the therapy room earlier than usual. Mark stood up reflexively, but before he could ask anything, she went straight to him. No words, no smile. She just pulled his sleeve, then gently put his hand on her shoulder. No one knew how many emotions were packed into that action. Only that Mark didn't ask more. He just stood there, his other hand hanging down, his eyes looking far away, as if guarding the whole evening sky for her. "I'll wait for you," he said softly, not looking directly at her, as if afraid that if he faced her, he would break into sobs. "I'll wait as long as it takes." No one answered, but she didn't take his hand away, and that was a form of answer. A school bus drove by, leaving a chorus of children laughing behind. Oak leaves fell around them like a small golden rain, not rustling, not tragic, just a continuation of a new season. Jayden looked at the sky. For the first time since returning, she felt like she didn't have to hide anymore. That winter came late. The late autumn rains fell slowly on the eaves of the small house where Jayden was living with her mother, while her father, Mark, still lived 2 hours away, but was there almost every weekend. They didn't get back together. There were cracks that couldn't be repaired, not because of hatred, but simply because they had spent many years on opposite shores. But now, they were learning how to sit together, by their daughter's bed, not to talk about the past, but to quietly be present in the present. Jayden still went to therapy regularly. Every Monday and Friday morning, she walked into the white room, then left slowly, her face rarely expressing much emotion. But each time, there was always someone waiting outside. Sometimes her mother, sometimes her father, and sometimes both of them. One day, while sitting on a bench in the park, Mark said, "I can't change what happened, but if you agree, we can do something for other children." Sarah looked at him for a long time. In her eyes, this man had once hurt her, but was also the one who hadn't given up, had found their daughter when everyone else had given up. 3 months later, they opened a small organization called Lightwell. The first office was in a row of old houses rented cheaply by the government. It wasn't big, just 2 rooms, a reception desk, a kitchenette, and a common room with a gray armchair chosen by Jayden herself. Lightwell was not just a place for psychological counseling. They organized sharing sessions for parents, trained manipulation recognition skills, and set up a hotline for teenagers who felt unsafe but didn't know who to talk to. Sarah took care of logistics. Mark went to present at seminars on identifying subtle control behaviors. Every time he told the story, he still choked, but didn't shake. Jayden didn't participate much. But one day, when the center had just welcomed its first case, a boy who was ostracized by friends and teachers because of his sexual orientation, Jayden sat down after closing time, taking a pencil to draw a spiral on the paper. No one asked anything, but the next morning, that boy said, "Was there a girl sitting next to me yesterday afternoon? I felt like someone understood me." One late afternoon, Mark and Sarah sat in Lightwell's living room, looking through the glass door to the backyard, where Jaden was watering the plants. The sun had faded. The girl, oh no, the young woman, was now taller than the day they first found her after 200 long days. Her hair had grown back, tied neatly, revealing a small scar behind her ear, the remaining trace of a life that they never wanted to mention. Mark suddenly said, very softly, "She doesn't smile much, but her eyes are brighter." Sarah nodded. Because this time, no one is forcing her to hide her sadness to be considered good anymore. Jaden turned her head and looked at them, not waving, not calling, just smiling. A small smile, enough to make the two adults sitting behind fall silent for a long time, as if afraid of dropping that fragile moment. Life didn't return to normal, but they learned how to live on, not needing to forget, but learning how to get through and to stay. We often believe that the bad guys will be clear through harsh words or aggressive behavior. But there are monsters wearing gentleness, entering our homes with seemingly harmless words and stealing children with what we think is concern. If you have read this far, perhaps you understand that hurt doesn't always have screams. Sometimes it's just a changing look, a forced smile that no one notices. Jaden's story is not just about a disappearance, but a wake-up call about ignored loneliness, exploited trust, and the power of a father who doesn't let go. We retell this story based on real cases, recorded, anonymized, and retold with respect for both the victims and those who did not turn away. If you find this story meaningful, please share it via WhatsApp to a friend who is a father, a mother, a teacher, or simply living amidst the silences that no one asks about. Because sometimes, just a timely share can save a person from the darkness.